Life doesn't always test us in battles we choose. Sometimes it strikes us where we are weakest, through the people we love the most. This is the story of Daniel Rivera, a quiet janitor the world never noticed, mocked for his worn-out shoes, ignored for his humble work. But inside him lived a strength greater than anyone could ever imagine. He had already lost the love of his life. And now, he was about to lose his daughter too. Her only chance to survive was a surgery far beyond his reach. Unless a miracle found its way to him, but miracles don't always come as blessings. Sometimes they arrive wrapped in betrayal, heartbreak, and pain that nearly destroys us. What Daniel endured will break your heart, but what he chose will restore your faith in humanity, because kindness is never wasted. And sometimes the most ordinary people carry the most extraordinary strength. Daniel was 42 years old, a janitor at a public school in a small town. His life was ordinary, almost invisible. Every morning he arrived before sunrise, mopping floors, emptying trash, scrubbing graffiti from walls before children arrived. No one paid much attention to him. Teachers passed him by without greeting. Students sometimes mocked his worn-out shoes and patched uniform. But Daniel never responded with anger. He simply smiled, kept his head down, and continued working. At home, however, Daniel carried a heavy burden. His wife, Elena, had passed away 5 years earlier after a long battle with cancer. Medical bills had drained their savings, leaving Daniel with debts he could barely manage. All he had left was his daughter, Isabella, a bright, kind-hearted girl of 16. She was Daniel's reason for living, his light in a world often filled with shadows. But Isabella was also sick. She suffered from a congenital heart condition, and the only hope for her survival was an expensive surgery that Daniel simply could not afford. Every day, after cleaning classrooms, Daniel would sit in the empty cafeteria, open his worn-out wallet, and count the few bills he had managed to save. He was always short, painfully short, and time was running out. One evening, as Daniel walked home from the school, he noticed an elderly woman struggling with her grocery bags. Instinctively, he rushed to help her. "Let me carry those for you, ma'am," he said gently. The woman looked up at him, surprised. "Oh, thank you. You're very kind." Her name was Margaret, a widow living alone in a small house a few blocks away. Daniel carried her bags home, refusing any payment she tried to offer. Over the weeks, Daniel began helping Margaret regularly, fixing her broken fence, mowing her lawn, running errands. He never asked for anything in return. Margaret, however, noticed the sadness in his eyes. One day, while he repaired her leaky faucet, she asked softly, "Daniel, you always help me, but who helps you?" Daniel hesitated, then smiled weakly. "Life is tough, but I manage." But Margaret pressed further, and eventually Daniel confessed. He told her about Isabella's condition, about Elena, about his debts. His voice trembled as he admitted his greatest fear, losing his daughter. The same way he had lost his wife. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She reached for his hand. "You are a good man, Daniel, and good men deserve miracles." Unknown to Daniel, someone else had been listening to his story. A young teacher at the school, Mr. Collins, overheard Daniel talking about his daughter's condition while cleaning the staff lounge. Mr. Collins was ambitious, but not in a noble way. He saw people not as human beings, but as opportunities. When Margaret later visited the school to meet Daniel, bringing him a warm lunch as thanks, Collins noticed her. He learned she was wealthy, a retired businesswoman with no children, and in Collins's mind, a plan began to form. That evening, Collins visited Margaret under the pretense of checking in on a community elder. He charmed her, offered help, and slowly began inserting himself into her life. Daniel, unaware, continued his daily struggle, saving coins in a jar, praying every night for Isabella's life. Weeks later, Margaret made a decision. She invited Daniel to her home and handed him an envelope. "I want you to have this," she said firmly. Daniel opened it and froze. Inside was a check, enough money to cover Isabella's surgery in full. Tears streamed down his face. I can't accept this. It's too much." But Margaret insisted. "It's not charity, Daniel. It's justice. For all the kindness you've given without asking anything in return." Daniel hugged her, overwhelmed with gratitude. But when Collins learned about the gift, his greed grew darker. He manipulated Margaret, convincing her that Daniel was taking advantage of her kindness. "You're being used," Collins whispered one evening. "He doesn't care about you, just your money. Let me protect you from people like him." And slowly, Margaret began to doubt. One afternoon, Daniel arrived at Margaret's house to thank her again. But instead of her usual warm smile, she looked cold, distant. "Daniel, I think it's best if you don't come here any more," she said firmly. His heart sank. "Did I do something wrong? You've taken enough from me. Please leave." Daniel was speechless. He wanted to explain, but her door shut in his face. Days later, when he went to deposit the check for Isabella's surgery, the bank informed him that it had been canceled. Daniel's world crumbled. His daughter's surgery was scheduled in weeks, and now he had nothing. At school, Collins watched with a sly smile as Daniel walked through the halls, shoulders heavy with despair. But fate has a way of revealing truth. One evening, Margaret received an anonymous letter in her mailbox. It contained recordings, Collins's voice, mocking her behind her back, boasting about how he had turned her against Daniel to control her wealth. Margaret's hands trembled as she listened. She realized the terrible mistake she had made, betraying the only man who had shown her genuine kindness. The next morning, Margaret rushed to the school. She found Daniel mopping the floors, his face pale with exhaustion. "Daniel," she whispered, tears streaming, "I was wrong. I was so terribly wrong." He looked at her, confused. "I let someone poison my mind against you, but now I know the truth." She handed him a new envelope, this time with double the amount. "Please, forgive me." Daniel's hand shook. "Margaret, But she placed her hand over his. "No, don't thank me, just save your daughter." Isabella's surgery was successful. For the first time in years, Daniel felt hope. His daughter's laughter filled their small home again, and light returned to his weary heart. But justice wasn't finished yet. Margaret, determined to expose Collins, presented the recordings to the school board. His manipulations, lies, and misconduct were revealed. Collins was fired, his reputation destroyed. As for Daniel, the town that had once overlooked him began to see him differently. Parents who had ignored him now greeted him with respect. Students who mocked him now whispered about his courage, but Daniel remained humble. He didn't seek glory. His only joy was seeing Isabella healthy and smiling. One evening, as he sat on the porch with Margaret and Isabella, he said quietly, "Life is strange. Sometimes justice doesn't come from courts or laws, but from hearts that choose to do what's right." Margaret nodded, smiling through tears. "And you, Daniel, are living proof of that." Daniel's story reminds us of a simple truth. Kindness is never wasted, even when the world misunderstands you, even when betrayal breaks. Justice finds its way back to those who live with honesty, compassion, and love. Because in the end, true justice isn't about punishment. It's about healing, about restoring what was broken, about reminding us that the smallest acts of kindness can create the biggest miracles, and sometimes the most ordinary people carry the most extraordinary strength. Okay, Daniel's story may be over, but there are many more stories waiting to be told. If this one touched your heart, make sure to subscribe my channels, or you never miss the next journey of kindness, justice, and hope.